Hello, everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Now settle in. The darkness has a story for you. I'm not the type of person who attracts danger. Routine is my comfort zone. I wake up at the same time every day, drive the same route to work, grab the same coffee from the same shop, hit the same gym, and go to bed around the same hour every night. Predictable, simple, comfortable. My friends like to joke that I live like an NPC, like I'm part of the scenery, never deviating from the same path. I guess I did, in a way, but it worked for me. I didn't realize how much I was inviting something unpredictable into my life. It all began about 14 months ago, back when everything felt normal. I had a routine, and I stuck to it. I went to the gym every night at 9:45 p.m. My schedule was set, so I never expected anything to change. The gym was empty at that hour, just a few of the same faces, night shift workers, a few regulars. No one to worry about. Then one evening, this man appeared. I remember it clearly because it was so cold that night and my breath fogged up in front of me as I walked into the gym. I noticed him standing by the entrance, leaning against the railing. His posture was slouched, his hands buried deep in the pockets of a heavy jacket. He didn't look like someone who was there to work out, just a man passing time. I nodded as I walked past, expecting nothing more than a casual interaction. People stand outside gyms all the time. Maybe he was waiting for someone. He didn't respond. He didn't even move. He just stared. That was the first moment I should have realized something was wrong. But I kept going. I didn't think anything of it. I was too focused on my routine. The next night, he was there again. Same spot, same posture, same vacant expression. He didn't look at anyone else, just me. He didn't even acknowledge me when I walked past. It was as though I was the only person who mattered to him. After a few more days of this, he started to speak. "You're running late today," he said flatly as I passed him on my way in. I froze, confused. Yeah, I answered awkwardly. "Long day at work." He didn't smile, didn't seem to care. "No worries, you'll catch up." Catch up? Catch up to what? I didn't ask. I just walked inside. But something about the way he said it stuck with me, like he was watching me in a way that wasn't normal. That night, I tried to shake it off. He was just some guy, right? Maybe he was bored. But the next time I went in, he was there again. And the time after that. And the time after that. Every single night without fail. Leaning on the railing. Watching me. After a week of this, I started to get uncomfortable. He didn't try to approach me, didn't make small talk. He just observed. And it wasn't the casual, polite kind of observation. It felt heavy. It felt like he was waiting for something. Waiting for me. One night, I got up the nerve to talk to him. I had just finished my workout, and as I passed him on my way out, I said, "Hey, do you need something?" He didn't reply right away. He just stared at me for a moment. And then, almost absent-mindedly, he said, "You didn't buy protein powder today." I blinked, unsure of what to say. How did he know that? I had bought protein powder for months, every time I went to the gym. It was a habit. I didn't even think about it. But now he was commenting on something so small, so insignificant, as though he had been tracking every part of my routine. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. Yeah, I didn't feel like it tonight." He didn't laugh. He didn't respond. He just stood there, watching me. For the next few weeks, his comments became more frequent, more specific. He started to make remarks about my schedule, the way I dressed, what I ate. Your car's louder this week. You're running a little longer today, aren't you? I see you're eating less salad these days. It wasn't normal. It wasn't just noticing things. It was like he had been studying me. And it got worse. I stopped acknowledging him altogether. I made sure not to look at him. I walked past him like he didn't exist. But even then, I could feel his eyes on me. Every time I turned a corner, I felt like he was there, watching, waiting. And then one day, he disappeared. I thought, finally, he's gone. For a few days, nothing happened. No strange comments. No lurking outside the gym. It felt like relief. But then, something shifted in me. I started to feel like I was waiting for him, looking over my shoulder more often, checking my rearview mirror. Then one night, everything changed. I came home later than usual, around 11:30 p.m. I fed my dog, took a shower, and collapsed on the couch, scrolling through my phone. The house was quiet, peaceful. But then my dog started growling. It was a low, rumbling growl. He rarely growled, especially not when there was no one at the door. He was staring intently at the back window. I froze, my heart pounding, my mind raced. It was faint at first, barely noticeable. But the tapping continued, and it wasn't wind or a tree branch. It was deliberate, measured, almost like someone was testing to see if I was paying attention. Tap, tap, tap. My stomach dropped and my breath caught. I crept to the window and peered through the blinds. There he was, standing in my yard. Watching me, my entire body went cold. I stepped back, trying to control my breathing. I grabbed my phone and called the police. As I waited, I looked out again. He had moved. He was standing under the streetlight now, just staring at my window. His face was illuminated in the soft light, and I could finally see it clearly. It was him, the same man. But now his eyes were wide, unblinking. His mouth curled into a small, tight grin that didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. He whispered something, but I couldn't make it out. I backed away from the window and stayed in the hall, waiting for the police. I didn't know how long it had been since I first saw him. It felt like an eternity. When the police arrived, they checked the yard and the area. They found no sign of him. No footprints, no cigarette butts, nothing. But then, just as they were about to leave, I saw something on the ground near the door. A folded piece of paper. My name was written on the outside. Inside there was a photo of me on the treadmill at the gym, taken through the window. No reflection, no flash, just a perfect, unsettling shot of me. The note inside said only one thing: you're safest when you stay consistent. I moved 2 weeks later, changed my gym, my hours, my routes. For a while, I felt safe. But then, as time passed, the fear started to creep back. Every time I stepped outside, I checked my surroundings. Every time I drove, I scanned the rearview mirror, wondering if I was being followed. 2 months later, I received a note in the mail. It read, "You're not alone. You just don't know it yet." I used to take the same bus every morning to my office. Same stop, same driver, same 40-minute ride across town. I'm one of those people who sits in the exact same seat each day without thinking about it. Front half of the bus. Third row on the right, by the window. I read emails, listened to podcasts, or just zoned out. It was automatic. Things changed in late winter last year, right after a long, cold streak that made everyone in the city cranky. I remember the morning clearly because my hands were freezing, and my usual coffee shop messed up my order. I boarded the bus, scanned my card, walked down the aisle, and slid into my usual seat. 2 stops later, as always, a small group boarded. The same regulars I'd seen for months. Office workers, students, a guy who always smelled like drywall. But that morning, someone new stepped on. A woman who seemed unsure of herself. She hesitated before sitting. I noticed her only because she took the seat directly behind mine. The bus was almost empty. Whole rows were available, but she sat right behind me. I brushed it off. People do odd things. The next day, she did it again. Then again the day after that. By the end of the first week, it became routine. I boarded, sat down, and 2 stops later she'd get on and sit behind me. Always behind me. Always silent. She wasn't threatening at first. Blonde hair cut short, pale skin, no makeup, plain clothes, a blank expression. Nothing stood out. She kept her hands folded on her lap most of the time, but she breathed strangely. Not loudly, just noticeably. Long inhales, long exhales, like she focused on each breath. And sometimes, when the bus was quiet enough, I thought I heard her, whispering, not words, just low sounds. At first, I thought she was on the phone, using earbuds I couldn't see. But it didn't match any normal phone conversation. It was too steady, too slow, like she was repeating a phrase to herself that meant something only to her. I told myself not to overthink it. I'm not a paranoid person. But after 2 weeks, she started doing something that pushed me past curiosity. She mirrored me. If I crossed my legs, she'd cross hers. If I leaned toward the aisle, her weight shifted too. If I looked out the window, I could see her reflection doing the same in the glass. I tried to play it cool, telling myself it was coincidence. That's a lie I think we all tell ourselves when discomfort grows too big to ignore. One morning, I turned slightly and pretended to look for something in my bag so I could glance at her. Her eyes locked forward, wide, unblinking. She didn't look at me, but the moment felt like she was aware of my attention anyway. Her breathing didn't change, her posture didn't move, and the whispering didn't stop. I got off 2 stops early that day, telling myself I needed the walk. She didn't follow. She stayed on the bus. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. The next day, I switched seats to the other side of the bus. She boarded, paused in the aisle, scanned the rows, then sat behind me again. Perfectly behind me, no hesitation. Something inside me grew tight, a combination of unease and frustration. I don't like confrontation, but I considered talking to her, asking if something was wrong. But something in my gut stopped me. She didn't feel aggressive. She just felt fixed on me in a way that didn't make sense. A week later, she escalated. My bus stop is a bench near a bakery. I usually get there around 7:18 a.m., give or take a minute. That morning, I got there earlier, around 7:10, and saw her across the street. She wasn't waiting for the bus. She was standing by a lamppost, facing my direction, hands at her sides, still as stone. Her gaze was angled toward the ground, but her head was tilted as if listening. I looked away for a second to check the time. When I looked back, she had shifted closer. Not walking, just closer. I stepped backward before I even registered doing it. Something in her posture bothered me. She wasn't threatening, but she wasn't neutral either. She felt like someone rehearsing how to appear normal. The bus arrived. I boarded fast. She got on 2 stops later, as always, and sat behind me. That was the morning she whispered something perfectly clear. As the bus rolled past the bridge, she leaned closer, closer than ever, and said softly, "You shouldn't change your seat. It makes everything harder." I froze. My throat closed. My hands clenched into fists. I didn't turn around. I didn't speak. I just stared forward until my stop came. I got off one stop earlier than usual and crossed the street, hoping to lose her. But she stepped off too. I decided to test something. I walked in the wrong direction, away from my office. She followed, not right behind me, but close enough that her steps didn't match a random pedestrian's pattern. I turned suddenly. She stopped instantly and looked down like a child caught misbehaving. I went into a coffee shop and stayed for 20 minutes. When I came out, she stood near the corner watching the window. No expression, no movement, just that constant stare. That night, I reported her to transit security. They told me they'd investigate. I never heard back. I started mixing up my schedule, taking earlier buses, later buses, skipping days. It didn't matter. She found me every time. Then came the morning everything hit a breaking point. The bus was more crowded than usual because of the rain. I sat near the middle. When she boarded, she scanned the seats with her chin slightly raised. The moment her eyes hit mine, she walked straight toward me. Every seat around me was full except the one beside me. She sat down, not behind me, beside me. Her arm touched mine. Her whispering didn't stop. I said quietly, "Can I help you?" She didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed locked forward. Then she whispered, "He doesn't like when you ignore him." My chest tightened. "Who?" She didn't answer. She just kept whispering the same low sounds. I got off the bus immediately, 3 stops early in the rain. She stayed seated, looking forward. For the rest of the day, I couldn't work. My mind was a mess of guesses. Was she mentally unwell? Was someone watching her? Was she being used by someone else? Or was I the fixation? The next morning, I considered calling in sick, but avoiding the bus forever felt unreasonable. I walked to the stop, heart pounding. The bus pulled up. I stepped on, looked down the aisle. She wasn't there. I sat. People boarded. Students talked. A kid played music too loud through his phone. The bus smelled like damp jackets and cheap coffee. Relief washed over me. Then, 2 stops before mine, I felt something. That feeling of eyes on the back of your neck. I turned slightly toward the window. Across the street, walking parallel to the bus, was the woman, matching the bus's pace almost perfectly. Her head was angled toward the windows. Toward me. The bus pulled ahead, and I lost sight of her. My stop came. I stepped off, heart hammering so hard I could hear my pulse in my ears. I turned in every direction. She wasn't there. I walked home fast, not running, but close. That night, I barely slept. 2 days later, I decided to alter every part of my routine. Earlier bus, different stop, different clothes, hoodie up, headphones in, and for almost a week, it worked. No sign of her. Then, on a windy Thursday morning, as I boarded the bus, the driver handed me something. A folded note. "For you," he said. "Someone dropped it off yesterday." Inside was a single line. "You shouldn't try to hide." My stomach dropped. I changed everything after that. I stopped riding the bus altogether, started driving, shifted hours, moved to a different part of the city months later. I haven't seen her again. But sometimes when I'm stuck at a stoplight and glance in the rearview mirror, I catch myself expecting to see a pair of eyes watching me through the windshield of a car behind me, blank, unblinking, waiting for me to slip back into a pattern. When I tell people this story, I always start with one thing. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't careless. I was just an average guy who didn't expect anything unusual to happen. I always locked my doors. I kept an eye on my surroundings, and I didn't assume the worst. I thought my life was simple, routine, predictable. I wasn't the type of person who thought bad things could happen in the most mundane of places. It all started when I moved into a townhouse just outside the city. I'd recently gone through a breakup, and I didn't want to live alone while I adjusted. So I found a roommate. His name was Daniel, early 30s, a programmer, quiet, clean, kept to himself. We split rent, and the kitchen was shared. But otherwise, we mostly stayed out of each other's way. The first couple of months were perfect. I worked early mornings. Daniel worked late nights. We barely crossed paths except on weekends when we'd exchange a quick hey in the hallway or catch up briefly in the kitchen. Everything felt fine. I felt safe. There was no reason to think anything would change. But after about 2 months, I started noticing small things. Little things that were out of place. Things that didn't feel quite right. I'm not the type to obsess over tiny details, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized something was off. A spoon in a different drawer. A cupboard door left half open when I was sure I'd closed it. The thermostat a few degrees warmer than I ever set it. At first, I told myself I was just being forgetful. Maybe I was the one making mistakes. Maybe I hadn't noticed. But then, things started disappearing. Small things at first. A granola bar here. A couple slices of bread there. I was getting annoyed, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I asked Daniel casually one night, "Hey, have you been eating my stuff?" "No problem if you have. I'm just trying to keep track of my groceries." He looked at me, genuinely confused. "No, man. I hardly eat here. I usually grab takeout from the office." I accepted that answer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I wasn't paranoid, I told myself again, but I started paying more attention. Then the noises started. One night around 2:30 a.m., I woke up thirsty. I dragged myself out of bed and walked down the hall to the kitchen. That's when I heard it. Soft, slow pressure on the ceiling above me. A faint movement, as though someone was shifting weight up there. Footsteps. The house had an attic, but it wasn't accessible unless you pulled down the ladder. I hadn't been in there since I moved in, and I assumed Daniel hadn't either. But there was no way someone could just be up there without making noise. The attic was just an empty space, or so I thought. I froze, listening. A low creak followed by a subtle rustling. Someone, or something, was up there? I couldn't be sure. Maybe it was just the house settling. Maybe it was the wind. But in that moment, I wasn't sure what to think. My heart was racing, but I told myself it was nothing. I shrugged it off, went back to bed, and tried to sleep. The next morning, I went into the hallway, and I noticed something strange. The attic ladder, which should have been securely latched against the ceiling, wasn't. It hung down a little, just enough to show that someone had been in the attic. Someone had opened it. I didn't say anything to Daniel at first. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore the fact that the ladder had been moved. I made sure to lock it securely after that. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And then it happened again. The ladder was down. Not all the way, but enough that I could tell someone had been up there. I asked Daniel, "Hey, have you been in the attic recently?" He gave me a confused look. Why would I go in there? I didn't even know we had an attic. That night, I locked the ladder shut myself. I made sure it clicked firmly into place. But when I woke up the next morning, it was open again. By now, I couldn't ignore it. Someone was messing with me. Someone had been up there, in the attic, and I had no idea who. I decided I'd had enough. I waited until the following Friday night when Daniel was out of town for the weekend. I took the opportunity to thoroughly check the house. I wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I walked around the house, checking every door and window, even the back gate. Everything was locked, nothing out of place. But the next night, that's when everything escalated. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it again. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. A creak, a floorboard shifting. I immediately froze, my phone slipping from my hands. The sound wasn't just the house settling. It was someone moving deliberately, slowly, cautiously. Someone who was trying to be quiet. I held my breath, straining to hear more. The footsteps stopped for a moment, then started again. This time, they were closer. Closer. I grabbed the broom from the corner and pulled down the attic ladder. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I couldn't just ignore it anymore. My heart pounded in my chest as I climbed up, shining my phone's flashlight around the attic. The space was dark, empty except for some old boxes and forgotten junk. Nothing seemed out of place. But then, I stepped on something soft. A water bottle. A brand neither Daniel nor I ever bought. It was the kind of water bottle you'd find in a gym bag, but I didn't recognize it. My blood ran cold. Whoever had been up here wasn't just passing through. They had been staying here, hiding here. I climbed down quickly, locking the ladder behind me. But the air in the house had changed. It was thick, suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching me, waiting. The next morning, I searched the house again. The attic, the closets, under the furniture. Every inch. Nothing. It didn't make sense. I couldn't find a trace of anyone. The following night, the unthinkable happened. I woke up around 3:15 a.m. to a soft click. The sound of my bedroom door shifting, just enough to let light spill in from the hallway. My heart sank. I wasn't imagining it. I reached for my phone, trying to pretend I was still asleep, but I could hear it. The slow, deliberate footsteps in the hall. Someone was standing outside my door. Each step was measured, deliberate, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't move, didn't dare breathe too loud. The footsteps stopped right in front of my room. A few seconds of silence passed, and then a gentle scrape against the doorframe. My whole body went rigid. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. My phone was gripped tight in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to make the call. I was paralyzed with fear. The footsteps retreated. I waited for a long time before daring to move. When the police arrived, they checked the house thoroughly. They didn't find anything. No one had broken in. No signs of forced entry. No footprints or anything suspicious. But when I went to check my bedroom, I found something else. A folded note. It was lying on the floor, just inside the door. I opened it with trembling hands. The handwriting was jagged and thin. "You shouldn't lock the attic. I get hungry." I didn't know what to think. I couldn't comprehend it. The officers took the note as evidence and told me they'd file a report. But they didn't have much to go on. No one had broken into the house. No one had threatened me directly. Daniel came back from his weekend trip and moved out 2 days later. He was just as shaken as I was. He didn't know what to make of any of it. I installed cameras, changed my locks. I didn't feel safe anymore, not in my own home. But the worst part, it didn't stop there. Weeks passed, and the fear still lingered. The smallest sounds would make my heart race. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there, waiting, watching, waiting for me to slip again. And some nights, when the building is silent, I swear I hear something familiar above me. I thought I was safe. I thought I had moved on. But people who can hide in attics don't just disappear. Not really.